What's happening, folks? Back with another reaction, back with some more Depeche Mode. We're going to go back to Ultra, always one of my favorite, if not my favorite album, at least before I began doing these deep dives and getting a better sense of some of the albums that I didn't listen to as regularly as I did Ultra, but this is 1997. I think I've only not reacted to a couple tracks on here, and one of them is an instrumental use link, so I'll come back for that one at some point soon, but for now we're going to hear Home. Now, when I heard this in the late 90s, and again, by then I was already going to punk shows and getting into techno and getting turntables, so my understanding of what was going on with the group was not as intense or fully knowledgeable as it could have been if I had still been focusing on a lot of what I would call then radio music, which is not really a knock, but again, when I was getting into punk and techno as a teenager, I was very keen to express that, a lot of the stuff I listen to, you can't hear it on the radio. You gotta go to these events, you gotta, buy the records, you gotta go to the shows. In any case, as I now understand it, Martin Gore was writing all of their songs, more or less, during this period, and ultimately, I know Wilder wrote some songs while he was there, but I thought this was a song entirely about Dave. Now, my understanding, given what I've read and given what people have said since I started the Depeche Mode deep dive a couple years ago, is that some of the songs about addictive behavior and self-destructive behavior were actually by Martin about himself, and that he was writing most of their songs until Dave began writing songs after 2000. I think several years after that, it was like 2008, something like that. In any case, I'm now aware that this song is at least as much about Martin himself as it is about Dave, even if maybe some of the lines you can see applying in both cases. And indeed, as I've come to understand, Martin had a problem with alcohol when other band members were famously having problems with drugs, like Dave. So I see this song a little bit differently than I did back then. Either way, the lyrics as I recall them is talking about a place where it's the end of the line, it's the wrong side of the tracks, it's a place where most people would not want to be, but where the narrator eventually feels like he's come home, like he's where he's maybe not supposed to be, but where he deserves to be. And it's a place where there's the heaviest crosses to bear, the biggest baggage, the worst cage or trap that you find yourself in. But he essentially accepts it. He feels that he's accustomed to it because this is who he is. So I think it speaks to destructive behavior that leads someone to dark places, and then maybe even being so conscious of it that you acknowledge what's happening, but you can't really move away from it. And again, as I understand that when they were on tour, there were times where Martin was drinking so much he was blacking out, so I feel like this is probably an outgrowth of the experiences he was having in the 90s behind the scenes. And as I've always said about Depeche Mode, even before I fully understood some of the nuances of their songwriting and some interpretations of their songs that just never occurred to me until I started doing these videos, they always write very vulnerably. They're songs that just put their issues and psychology and personal reflection, even if that's not the most admirable or desirable reflection, out there for consumption. So that's always a brave thing, I think. The Sonics, as I recall them, I haven't listened to this in a little while, they have a bit of flow to them, but also some deep electronic heft. It's a tune that sort of moves through some different phases sonically, if I'm remembering. Let's hear it. This is Depeche Mode. The track is Home, and it's from the 1997 album Ultra. That banshee dissonant sound.
It is a song from the wrong side of town, where I'm bound to the ground by the loneliest sound. That pounds from within, and it's pinning me down. is a page from the emptiest stage. A cage of the heaviest cross ever made. A gauge of the deadliest trap ever laid. And I thank you for bringing me here, for showing me home, for singing these tears. Finally I found that I belong here. And the sickly sweet smelling sheets that cling to the backs of my knees and my feet. But I'm drowning in time to a desperate beat. And I thank you for bringing me here, for showing me hope, for singing these tears. Finally I found that I belong. Feels like home. I should have known from my first breath.
Muffled kick beat. Strings.
Somebody only true friend I call mine, who pretend that I'll make amends the next time. Befriend the glorious end of the line. And I thank you for bringing me here, for showing me home, for singing these tears. Finally I found that I belong here.
I think that's probably a 303 doing that rising and falling electric bubble. Rapid fire hi-hats. In many ways, the tune I was recalling before I hit play, but there were aspects of that I didn't recall. Number one, didn't recall that intense, dissonant, banshee, scraping sort of sound, or I don't know, like metallic wind. I don't know how you would characterize it at the beginning. There was a deep bass pulse that I noticed along the way that didn't come back to me when I was thinking of the Sonics. And the intensity of strings. Now, I remembered the strings being part of that, but not as forceful as they became near the end of the tune, and that acidic style crescendo, and then relief, that little up and down, bubbly, like pulsing type of sound toward the end. I also didn't recall that. So, again, this is an album that I've known very well for a long time, but you listen to a lot of music and then some things you don't hear for a while. There's details that sort of slip back and other parts that retain in the front of your memory. It's another song that Martin sings, which, it's not to say, like, even from the early phase, he began singing at least a few tunes here and there, but certainly when you think of Depeche Mode and the vocals, you tend to think of Dave's voice, so another one that I guess was so personal to Martin that he decided to sing himself. I do enjoy, I've seen them a couple times, including at the end of 2023, and it seems like Dave and Martin really enjoy the way that they both approach songs, and Dave was very excited to sing or to introduce Martin before he sung a song and talking about his dulcet tones and so on. So I imagine the rapport between Dave and Martin, and certainly the, let's say, ego when it comes to singing particular songs may have changed over time. I remember watching one of those documentaries that I've gone through on my Patreon, and a couple of them that I've been able to post here on YouTube talked about how Dave was a bit uncomfortable at first because it's like, you're the lead singer, and then there's songs where literally you're not doing anything now because you're not the one singing lead on it. But I imagine over the decades and the fact that they're the only two guys left in the band, the interaction when it comes to who's singing what is probably different these days. But again, hearing Martin is always a bit different from hearing Dave, although there were a couple moments there where he goes a bit deeper and heavier and a bit closer to Dave's voice than I normally think of him. I normally think of him a bit higher. He certainly can sing very low and deep, but just something about a couple of those moments was like, oh, I could hear Dave singing that part. So, as I said, it sounds like a very depressing song. It sounds like a song where someone is resigned to who they are and what their behavior is. But again, part, I suppose, of either pulling yourself out of that or finding the best that you can in that type of situation or life or dynamic is acknowledging it and recognizing it for what it is. So I think that's part of what that song is all about. Let me know if you disagree. Again, I thought I had a decent sense of Depeche Mode lyrics and sonics and their history, and then I started doing reactions and I learned there's other people who know so much more. So if you have a different take there, or if you have some background information that sort of changes the dynamics of what I've come to think about this track, which again is a bit broader than what I used to think about it, where it's like, oh, it's clearly about Dave and the dark places that he went to at this time and so on. And it's like, oh, actually, it's maybe more about Martin and his alcoholism and the way he went to some very dark places at the same time, but maybe for different reasons. But again, if you have a different angle, let me know. Other than that, I will see you next time. Peace.